And at the end of the day, if you've got a bunch of people absolutely convinced that you've got blood on your hands, that you're responsible for the genocide of Gaza and children, if a bunch of people genuinely believe that, I'm not sure another door-knocking session or another leafleting session is going to have made a huge amount of difference.
Tell us how you felt, because I was obviously in the head office, actually in a nearby office to Lizzy in Canary Wharf, and I have to say your result was one of the big shocks of the night. We all gasped when we saw the result. How did you feel? I mean, did you have an inkling that night? Was that the first time you knew? I mean, how did you feel? What happened?
Oh, I mean, it's obviously brutal to lose, and nobody wants to lose.
Yeah.
I think that when you are putting yourself forward for Parliament, you do have to be slightly philosophical about these matters. You do always have to have a reality check and know at the back of your mind that you could lose. I mean, because that's the nature of the job. It's a precarious occupation. So, given the strength of feeling on the Gaza issue, given that a sizable number of my former constituents in Leicester South felt that the general election campaign was a referendum on Labour's Gaza position, given that some of them literally thought that I was personally responsible for genocide and I personally had blood on my hands, I mean, a position which I just thought was baffling, frankly, and something I fundamentally disagreed with, given I'd called for a ceasefire, given that I'd had a long-standing commitment to Palestinian state recognition, given that I even had Palestinians coming to campaign for me. But nonetheless, when there is a depth of anger and a strength of feeling, it's very difficult to overcome that. But then there was the other half of the constituency who were more preoccupied with the future of the National Health Service, more preoccupied with energy bills, more concerned about schools for their children. So it was a very divided election campaign. It's now a very divided constituency, with some people saying, what's going to happen? We wanted an MP who was more focused on the NHS, and the other side of the constituency saying this is great. We wanted to send a message. I've got to say, we knew what the message was. We'd been hearing the message loud and clear for months and weeks. It's why we'd been calling for a ceasefire. But it didn't seem to matter that we'd been calling for a ceasefire. All that seemed to matter was what Labour did on a rebel SNP amendment to a King's Speech in November, which everybody knows who follows Parliament would have had no material impact on what was happening on the ground in the Middle East. But nonetheless, look, that's politics. And I wouldn't want you to think I'm being casual or dismissive about this. I'm just recognising that if you put yourself up for election, you've just got to accept that sometimes it's not going to go your way. On the other hand, despite my understandable and natural disappointment at losing, particularly in what had been a very brutal, vitriolic campaign of getting huge abuse on the streets, you may have seen some of the videos that got shared on social media. I mean, absolutely horrible, the abuse that we used to get. On the other hand, I'm immensely, immensely proud that I played my bit in securing a Labour landslide victory. I mean, you couldn't get me off the telly in that campaign because I was talking about making the case for Labour, going on the attack on the Tory record. I had a huge national role in that general election campaign, and I'm immensely proud that I was part of the strategic discussion about Labour's campaign as part of the strategy in Labour head office, and I played a big front of house role. And look at that Labour victory. And in the end, look, it's always up to the voters to decide. But all the improvements that will now be delivered for the people of Leicester South, improvements in the National Health Service, improvements in our local schools, improvements in workers' rights, improvements to bring down energy bills, it's because we've got a Labour government, not because they've got an independent MP.
Do you think that you took your eye off the ball a little bit, though, because you were front and centre of that campaign? You were on the TV all the time. You were doing these emergency press conferences. You really were at the very heart of that. But do you think that it was a bit like Ed Balls almost? It was, you were so busy doing the central stuff that maybe you didn't really realise what was going on locally and how bad it was for you?
I mean, possibly, but woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Yeah.
I'm a great believer in always moving forward. Don't look back. Have no regrets. again, I don't want you to think I'm being casual about it. I'm not remotely, but what's the point of beating yourself up?
Mm.
And at the end of the day, if you've got a bunch of people absolutely convinced that you've got blood on your hands, that you're responsible for the genocide of Gaza's children, if a bunch of people genuinely believe that, I'm not sure another door-knocking session or another leafleting session is going to have made a huge amount of difference. But look, you've got to look forward, and you've got to look, and people will have to hold these independent MPs to account, whether they actually deliver, whether they actually, and people will have to decide whether the Labour government delivers for them. But as I say, the improvements that I'm confident that will be delivered for the people of Leicester South is because we've got a Labour government, not an independent MP.